The first sound was not the wind, nor the slow creak of the barn door. It was the faintest uneven breath drifting up from the frozen ground. I'd just stepped onto my porch after riding the east fence line, frost stiff in my coat, when I heard it. I set the wire and spade down, crouched low, and brushed aside a tangle of weeds under the steps. In the dim space between the joists, a small form lay, curled tight dress caked with mud, one boot missing hands locked around a ragged cloth doll. She didn't stir when my shadow fell across her. The cold was seeping fast, and there was no time to wonder who she was or how she'd gotten there. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and tap like and subscribe. If you've ever faced a moment where a single choice could change everything. My name is Boone Maddox, and I've worked this land in the Arizona Territory near on 20 years. I was raised along the Pecos, where a day's worth was measured in fence posts sunk and water hauled before sundown. My folks were plain people, hard on waist easy with neighbors when they needed a hand, and strict about keeping the Sabbath quiet. The war took me young, and when I came back, the fever took my wife and the boy she never got to hold. Since then, it's been cattle tools and silence. I never asked for company, and in truth, I'd near forgotten what it felt like to have another voice inside these walls. Out here, every dollar is worked for. My world is barter and lean stores in winter salted meat flour and a barrel coffee stretched thin. Down in the towns, it's another story. Polished boots, paper money talk of railroads and land claims, traded over whiskey. I've kept to my side of it, because a man can lose his ground quicker than he can win it back, once lawyers and speculators start taking interest. The winter had been sharp that year, the kind where your breath hangs heavy and the stock crowd close for warmth. I'd been mending the southern line for days, keeping an eye out for coyotes. The last thing I expected was to find a child hiding under my porch, with the cold working its way into her bones. But there she was, silent eyes fixed on me, like she was trying to decide if I was real. I carried her inside, set her near the stove, and wrapped her in one of the old wool blankets my wife had kept. She didn't speak, just held that doll tight. I warmed milk with a spoon of sugar and watched her sip it, the firelight catching the hollow in her cheeks. By sundown, she was asleep on the cot, still clutching the doll. Outside, the wind shifted sharper now, as if it carried something on it from beyond the ridge. I remember standing at the window, looking toward the tree line, feeling that prickle between the shoulders a man gets when the quiet is about to change. That night, the cabin felt different. Not louder, just less empty. I didn't yet know who she was, where she'd come from, or what road had led her to my porch. But before the week was out, the answer would come walking through the cottonwoods, and it would change the course of all three of our lives. By the third week of Lucy staying under my roof, the cold had set in deeper. The sky was a pale sheet most days, the ground holding frost until near midday. We'd fallen into a quiet routine, she shadowing me in the barn, feeding hens without being told, standing close enough to catch the warmth off my coat when the wind came sharp from the ridge. She still hadn't spoken, but her eyes followed every move I made, as if she was learning the rules of this place without needing to ask. That afternoon, I was splitting wood on the side of the house. The axe blade bit into the round with a clean crack breath clouding out in front of me. That was when movement caught my eye. Beyond the stand of cottonwoods, a lone figure weaving through the brush. I straightened, letting the axe head rest in the block, my gaze narrowing. Whoever it was had no coat hair whipped by the wind dress hanging in strips. She moved with a limp, one hand clamped to her side like something inside had broken. I stepped to the porch, the Henry rifle leaning where I'd left it, my palm resting on the stock but not raising it. She saw me, but her eyes went past, fixing on the cabin window. Lucy was there, sitting near the stove, doll in hand, her face turned toward the light outside. The woman's knees buckled. She caught herself with one shaking hand in the dirt and forced her voice out, raw and dry. "You took my daughter in. Now you must take me too." I didn't answer. My grip eased off the rifle and I walked to the door. She watched me swaying on her feet. I opened it wide and stepped aside. She came forward slow, each step a fight, her eyes fixed on the warmth inside. When she crossed the threshold, her legs gave way again. I caught her under one arm, feeling the cold, through the thin fabric, the tremor running through her shoulder. She smelled of smoke, blood, and too many nights in the open. Lucy had risen from her spot near the stove. She didn't speak, didn't rush, just crossed the floor barefoot until she stood within arm's reach. The doll hung loose at her side. The woman knelt slowly, pain showing in every motion, and pulled the child against her. Lucy's small hand settled on the torn fabric of her skirt, holding there as if to anchor both of them. I stoked the fire higher and set a pan of water on the stove. She told me her name Mariah and that she hadn't eaten in days. I poured her a tin cup of warm water, watching her fingers shake so hard the spill ran down her wrist. Her face was drawn, one lip split, and healing hair matted from wind and dirt. She held Lucy close, eyes shut, like she needed to feel the girl's breathing before she could say more. When she finally spoke, her words came flat, each one a stone laid down. Her husband Ethan Dunn had owed money to a gambler named Pike in a town east of here. He'd traded her over in the hope it would settle the debt. It hadn't. She was kept under watch, locked away. Lucy had been with her for only the first few days before vanishing. She thought the girl was dead. Then she heard a rancher out this way had taken in a child with curly hair and a cloth doll. She walked 2 towns and more to find out. She didn't ask for pity, and I didn't offer it. I told her she could sleep in the cot by the fire and that she wasn't going anywhere until she healed. She gave a single nod, the kind that says more than thanks would. That night I cooked the last of the salted venison into a stew. She managed half a bowl before her hands trembled too much to lift the spoon. Lucy ate in small bites, her gaze shifting between the two of us. We said nothing over supper, but the air wasn't empty. It was heavy with questions that didn't need asking yet. After the fire burned low, Lucy curled on the rug between us, one arm resting across her mother's leg. I laid another blanket over them both and sat in the rocker rifle across my knees, looking out the window toward the dark ridge. There were 2 of them here now, and whether I meant to or not, I'd decided they'd stay. Morning came with frost thick on the windows. I moved through the cabin quietly, feeding the stove, brushing ice from the porch rail. Supplies were running low, but I didn't saddle the horse. I didn't want to leave them alone, not yet. When Mariah woke, she pushed herself upright, slow, a hand pressed to her ribs. I set a slice of cornbread and a cup of warm water beside her. She needed a doctor, but she only said she needed time. Through the day, Lucy followed me to the barn as usual, while Mariah stood in the doorway, watching. By noon, she'd gathered eggs from the coop, moving slow but steady. Later, she came out to the fence line where I was working wire and told me she'd helped her father mend fence back in Missouri. I handed her the end of the line, and we worked without another word until the sun dropped low. That night, after Lucy had gone to sleep, Mariah said she didn't want to be a burden. I told her she wasn't. You gave her back, I said. That's more than most. She turned her face to the wall, and we left it there. The days that followed settled into a rhythm, quiet but sure. She moved easier, the bruises fading. Lucy began to hum while feeding the hens. There was more life in the cabin than there had been in years. But I knew winter wasn't done with us, and neither was the world beyond the ridge. The afternoon it began to change again. The wind shifted and carried a sound from the south. I was in the yard mending a halter when I heard it, a slow, deliberate crunch of hooves in the frozen dirt, too steady for a stray cow. I looked up toward the cottonwoods and saw a rider moving in our direction. The rider came into view slow, his horse thin and dust-caked from miles on the trail. He reined up at the edge of my fence line, eyes studying the cabin before settling on me. I stepped down from the porch boots, crunching over the frost-hardened ground, and stopped just far enough to keep the post between us. "You Boone Maddox," he called, voice rough from the road. I nodded once. "That's right." He shifted in the saddle hat brim, low, the lines in his face set deep from years in the sun. "Name's Dalton Pike. Loney Pike was my brother." I kept my stance, the cold air hanging between us. He went on. "I heard he died over in Lordsburg. Before that word was, he'd been running with a woman. Just need to know if she's alive." I didn't answer right off. "She's alive." He let out a breath, like that was the only piece of news worth riding for. "She got a child." Why Dalton's gaze didn't flinch. If that girl's got Pike blood, there might be folks down the line looking to settle debts. Loney didn't just owe cards, he owed the kind of men who don't forget. "She's not his." He didn't argue. "Fair enough, I just needed to hear it." He shifted the reins in his gloved hand. "What are you planning to do now?" I asked. "Turn around, head out. I won't be back." I waited until he turned his horse and rode toward the ridge before heading inside. Mariah was at the table with Lucy in her lap. The girl's eyes were wide, following me until I shut the door behind me. "Pike's brother," I said. "He came looking for answers. I gave them." Her voice came low. "Is he coming back?" "No. And if he does, he won't like what he finds." She held Lucy tighter, her knuckles pale against the fabric of the child's dress. "What did he want?" "He wanted to know if she was Loney's." I told him no. "She's not," she said quickly. "Ethan was her father for better or worse." I crouched beside them, one hand resting on the edge of the table. "No one's going to take her. You're here now. That's all that matters." Her shoulders eased just a fraction, and she nodded. Lucy looked between us, then laid her head against her mother's chest. That night, after Lucy had fallen asleep, Mariah turned toward me under the quilt. "I want to stay in your room from now on," she said. "You already do," I answered. She shook her head. "I want more. I don't want to just be someone you're protecting. I want to be someone you chose. I did choose you. The moment you stepped on that porch." Her smile was faint but certain. She reached for my hand, holding it under the blanket until sleep found her. The days after passed quieter. Snow began to pull back from the south fence line, leaving dark earth in patches. Mariah moved more freely, her steps steady in the yard. Lucy laughed now, small bursts when she fed the hens or rode behind me to the far pasture. One morning she came to the table with a scrap of paper tongue caught between her teeth as she wrote with a stub of pencil. She slid it to me, the letters crooked, one turned backward. "Maddox," it read. I looked at Mariah, and she said, "She asked last night if she was really part of us." "You are," I told Lucy. "You always were." The following week, I hitched the wagon and rode into Calico Ridge with a clear purpose. I didn't linger in town, didn't stop for talk. By the time I came home, a folded paper sat in my vest pocket and a small tin box rested under my arm. Mariah was outside brushing Lucy's hair, the girl sitting still on the porch step. I handed Mariah the paper. She opened it slow, her fingers pausing halfway down the page. "You adopted her?" She said the words almost a whisper. I nodded. I didn't want her carrying anyone else's name. "She's ours." She set the paper aside, carefully pulling Lucy into her arms. The girl hugged her tight, without knowing exactly what had changed, only that it mattered. When Lucy had gone inside, I gave Mariah the tin box. Inside was a plain silver ring. No stone, just strong metal, shaped to last. "I made it," I told her. She turned it in her hand. "Why now?" "Because I want this to be yours just as much as it's mine. You walked through hell to find your daughter, then stayed to build something here. You never asked for anything, but you deserve everything." Her eyes stayed on mine as I slid the ring onto her finger. She stepped close, kissed me once, and said, "We're a family now." All the way. That evening, the wind carried the smell of thawing earth, and the first notes of spring birds reached the porch. It felt like the land was shifting with us. But even as the days grew longer, I knew there was still one more shadow to reckon with before peace could hold here for good. Spring worked its way up the ridge in slow, uneven steps. The last snow melted in strips along the fence posts, and the creek ran louder with meltwater from higher ground. The mornings held birdsong now, but the air still bit when the wind shifted north. Inside the cabin, life had settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. Mariah rose early, tying her hair back with one of the ribbons she'd found in a drawer. Lucy followed her in the kitchen, quiet but willing to fetch whatever her mother needed. Some afternoons, Lucy trailed me to the barn, small boots crunching in the thawed mud while Mariah mended or sorted in the yard. She no longer moved like a woman guarding every step. Her stride had steadied her face, no longer drawn from pain. At times I'd glance over and see her sweeping the porch or hanging wash without realizing she was humming. One morning I saddled the horse for a ride down to the creek. Lucy wanted to come, so I lifted her up before me, and we followed the water until it bent around a stand of cottonwoods. The girl leaned against me, the wind pulling at her curls. By the time we returned, Mariah was out back, her gaze fixed on something by the fence line. I knew before she turned that she'd found the grave. The simple cross stood where I'd put it 7 years earlier, the name Lorna carved rough into the wood. Mariah's hands were in her pockets, hair brushing her cheek in the breeze. I stopped beside her. "She was your wife," she said. "Yeah. She died here, fever." Took her and the baby. She looked at me, then eyes searching for something I couldn't name. "You buried her yourself. Didn't trust anyone else to do it right. You loved her." I didn't answer quick, but I met her eyes when I did. Yeah, I did. "I'm not her, I know. I'm not here to replace her." "You're not." She looked toward the cabin, then back at me. "I want to be here. If that's still all right." "It is." We walked back without more words. A week later, I finally made the trip into Calico Ridge for supplies. I showed Mariah where the rifle was kept and how to work the latch on the cellar door. "If someone rides up, don't answer unless you know who it is," I told her. She nodded, serious. "We'll be all right." Town was the same as I'd left it, though a few more faces lingered near the telegraph office waiting on news. I bought flour, salt, a pair of boots for Lucy, and fabric Mariah had asked for. When I returned at dusk, the cabin was warm, and the smell of stew met me at the door. Lucy ran over, wrapping her arms around my leg. I rested a hand on her back before stepping inside. Mariah stood by the stove, wiping her hands on her apron. "You came back," she said. "I would." Her smile was tired but real. That night, after Lucy was asleep, we stood on the porch. The stars hung low, and the air had that dampness that meant more thaw ahead. Mariah leaned against the post. "She's getting better," she said. "Yeah. She started drawing in the dirt today. Said something that sounded like Mama. Not clear, but close." I nodded, letting the quiet sit between us. She glanced over. "You all right? I didn't think I'd have this again." She looked toward the dark yard. Neither did I. The weeks that followed brought more change. Mariah moved with ease now, her steps light across the yard. Lucy spoke a few words at a time, testing her voice again. I never made note of it aloud, but each time she did it, settled something deeper in the house. It was in the 3rd week of May that the quiet shifted. I'd gone into town again for salt and lamp oil. Near the livery, a man I knew from Lordsburg pulled me aside. His voice was low. "Ethan Dunn's dead. Caught stealing cards, shot a man, tried to run. Mob strung him up." I rode home slow, the weight of the words sitting heavier than my supplies. Mariah was kneeling by the chicken coop when I came into the yard, Lucy beside her tossing feed. I tied off the horse and called her name. She straightened, wiping her hands on her skirt, reading the set of my face before I spoke. Inside with Lucy, settled at the table drawing with a bit of chalk, I told her. Ethan's gone. She froze, then sat on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the floorboards. I thought I'd feel something, she said, after a long pause. Do you? She shook her head. Just tired. We let it rest there. Some losses burn quick and hard. Others fade long before the end comes. That night after Lucy slept, Mariah stepped out into the yard, where I was splitting wood. She held a lantern, its light swaying over the dirt between us. I thought about leaving once he was gone, she said. But I don't want to start over somewhere else. Not when we've already started something here. You don't have to explain, I know. But I see how Lucy looks at you. I feel it too. I'm not the same man I used to be. Don't know how to court, don't know how to ask. She smiled small and sure. Then don't ask. Her hand rested against my chest, and I covered it with mine. Lantern light caught in her eyes as she whispered, We can make this work. We already are. She leaned in and kissed me, not rushed, just steady. When she pulled back, she didn't go to the cot that night. And when we lay down her back against me, I knew she'd found her place here for good. By summer's turn, the land had gone green along the lower pasture, and the air was thick with the smell of sage after the rain. Days moved slow, but there was weight to each one. Mariah's step no longer carried the guarded pause it once had, and Lucy was quick to follow her mother's lead, running barefoot through the yard until her laughter cut through the heat. Inside the cabin had taken on a lived-in feel, clothes drying on a line strung across the far corner. A quilt folded over the rocker, the scent of bread cooling on the table. Mariah moved through the rooms like she'd always known them, her hands brushing the same door frames I'd built with Lorna years before. The quiet between us had shifted. It wasn't distance now, but something shared. One morning, while I was oiling the saddle out on the porch, Lucy came out holding a paper, her small fingers smudged with pencil lead. She handed it up without a word. The letters were uneven, one turned backwards, but it read clear enough. Maddox. Mariah stepped into the doorway behind her. She asked me last night if she was really part of us, she said. You are, I told Lucy. You always were. Not long after, I hitched the wagon for a trip to Calico Ridge. The town was busy with wagons lined along the street and the clink of tools from the smithy. I kept my errands short, but I stopped at the courthouse before heading home. By the time I rode back into the yard, a folded paper was tucked in my vest pocket and a small tin box rested under my arm. Mariah was brushing out Lucy's hair on the porch steps. I handed her the paper first. She opened it slow, scanning the lines, her lips parting just slightly. You adopted her, she said, voice catching on the words. I nodded. Didn't want her carrying any name but ours. She set the paper aside carefully and pulled Lucy close, her arms tight around the girl. Lucy didn't understand the shape of the change, but she clung to her mother all the same. When Lucy had gone inside, I handed Mariah the tin box. She eased it open to find the plain silver ring inside. No stone, just strong metal meant to last. Made it myself, I told her. Her thumb ran over the smooth band. Why now? Because I want this to be yours, as much as it's mine. You've given more to this place than I could ask. I want you to have everything that's mine to give. Her eyes didn't leave mine as I slid the ring onto her finger. She leaned up and kissed me, steady and certain. We're a family now, she said. That night the air was warm enough to leave the door open, the sounds of the night drifting and the soft rustle of grass, a coyote calling far off. Mariah sat sewing at the table while Lucy played with her doll by the fire. I worked by lamplight, fixing the hinge on the cellar door. Everything in the cabin felt settled, like the walls themselves held the quiet in place. In the weeks that followed, we slept in the same room, Lucy's cot set close by the fire. Mariah no longer flinched at sudden noises, and Lucy's voice grew stronger each day. She spoke my name one morning when I handed her the feed tin, and I let it pass without making it a moment, but it stayed with me. One afternoon, Mariah came to me while I was tightening the rail on the corral. "I want to ride into town with you next time," she said. "You sure I've got no reason to hide anymore?" A few days later, we left Lucy with Mrs. Talbot, a widowed neighbor 3 ridges over, who had taken to the girl quickly. The ride into Calico Ridge was quiet, her arms around my waist, her head resting against my back. The town's main street was busy, the clap of horses' hooves mixing with the chatter from the mercantile steps. Folks glanced our way. Most hadn't seen me with company before, but no one spoke against it. Inside the general store, I picked up flour, sugar, and lamp oil, while Mariah chose fabric thread and new boots for Lucy. Mrs. Quinn at the counter gave a small smile when she rang us up. "She yours then? She's ours?" Mariah answered. We rode home under a sky streaked with orange light, the air cooling with evening. When we reached Mrs. Talbot's, Lucy came running, calling out for her mother. Mariah swung down to meet her, gathering her up before the girl's feet touched the ground again. That night, after Lucy was asleep, Mariah stepped onto the porch with a folded blanket around her shoulders. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. I waited. "I think I might be pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. I stepped closer. "You all right with that? I didn't expect to be. But yes, then so am I." She let out a long breath. "I thought you might think it was too soon. Nothing about this is too soon. We've already been through worse." She leaned into me and I rested my hand against her back, the night air cool around us. Inside, the lamp still burned low, throwing a warm glow over the only life I wanted now. The next morning, the light broke soft over the ridge. But somewhere beyond the pasture fence, a thin trail of dust rose where no cattle should be. The next morning, the thin trail of dust I'd noticed the day before was gone, blown flat by the night wind. Still, it stayed in the back of my mind while I went about chores. Mariah was in the kitchen when I came in from the barn, sleeves rolled to her elbows as she shaped dough on the table. Lucy sat nearby, swinging her feet while she shelled peas into a tin bowl. The scene was calm, but my eyes kept straying to the window, scanning the pasture beyond. By late afternoon, the air had grown heavy, and still the kind that makes sound travel far. That was when I heard it hoofbeats, steady and slow, coming from the north side of the ridge. I stepped out to the porch and saw a rider easing down toward the yard. His hat was pulled low, coat dusty from miles on the trail. He reined up short of the fence and called out, "Looking for Boone Maddox?" "That's me," I answered. He leaned forward in the saddle. "Name's Dalton Pike. Loney Pike was my brother." The name brought a shift in the air, though I kept my stance easy. "Not here for trouble," he said. "Heard he was running with a woman before he died. Just want to know if she's alive." "She's alive. She got a child." Why Dalton met my eyes. If that girl's got Pike blood, some might think they've got debts to settle. Loney left more than cards unpaid. She's not his. He gave a short nod. "Fair enough. I just needed the truth." "What now?" I asked. "Turn around and ride out. Won't be back." I watched him head toward the ridge until he was just a shape in the dust, then went back inside. Mariah was at the table with Lucy on her lap. I shut the door. Pike's brother came looking for answers. I gave them. Her arms tightened around Lucy. "Is he coming back? And if he does, he won't like what he finds." "What did he want?" "To know if Lucy was Loney's." I told him no. "She's not. Ethan was her father." She said the words sharp in her mouth. I crouched so my eyes were level with hers. "No one's taking her." You're here now. That's all that matters?" She nodded, though her grip on the girl didn't ease right away. That night, after Lucy was asleep, Mariah turned toward me under the quilt. "I want to be yours fully," she said. "Not just someone you're protecting, someone you chose. I chose you the day you stepped on my porch." Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes. She took my hand under the blanket and held it there until her breathing slowed. The days after were steady. The air warmed enough to work outside without a coat, and the sound of running water filled the low gullies again. Mariah moved with a lightness I hadn't seen before, her steps sure on the packed dirt of the yard. Lucy's voice grew stronger, calling my name when she brought the feed tin or tugging at my sleeve to show me a nest of eggs. One morning she came to the table with a scrap of paper and the stub of a pencil. The letters were crooked, one turned the wrong way, but it read Maddox clear enough. Mariah stood behind her, a quiet smile on her face. "She asked last night if she was really part of us," she said. "You always were," I told Lucy. Not long after, I rode into Calico Ridge and returned with a folded paper in my vest pocket. It bore the seal of the justice's office, proof that Lucy was mine in name as well as in life. Mariah read it at the porch rail, her fingers brushing the ink before she set it aside to pull Lucy close. When the girl had gone inside, I handed Mariah a tin box. Inside lay a plain silver ring, polished smooth. "Made it myself," I said. She turned it in her hand. "Why now?" "Because this is yours as much as it's mine. You've stood with me and made this place whole again. I want you to have everything I can give." Her eyes held steady on mine as I slid the ring onto her finger. She kissed me once, certain and unhurried. That evening, the smell of rain drifted in from the west. Mariah sat by the fire, mending Lucy's dress, while I checked the latch on the back door. Everything in the cabin felt set in its place. But the memory of that dust trail stayed with me. I knew well enough that quiet on the frontier could turn without warning. The wind came up from the west that morning, carrying the scent of rain, and something sharper I couldn't place. I was in the barn mending a length of harness when Lucy ran in, cheeks flushed. "Riders," she said. I stepped outside. 3 men were coming down the slope from the ridge, their horses dark with sweat. The lead rider was broad-shouldered, his coat hanging open to show a revolver tied low on his hip. The other 2 kept their hands near their belts. Mariah came to the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. I told her to take Lucy inside. She hesitated, then pulled the girl close and stepped back into the cabin. The riders stopped short of the fence. The lead man pushed his hat back. "Name's Virgil Pike. Loney was my cousin." I kept my tone even. "What do you want?" He spat in the dust. "Word is my cousin left something behind. A woman, a child. Folks say the girl's Pike blood. If that's true, she belongs with us." "She's not his," I said, "and she belongs right where she is." Virgil's mouth pulled tight. "You calling me a liar? I'm telling you the truth." He glanced at the other 2. "Truth's what a man makes it. We'll see about that." I rested my hand on the fence rail. "You won't cross that fence today. Turn around and there's no trouble." For a moment, none of them moved. Then Virgil eased his horse forward a step. "You think you can keep her territories full of men who'll take a price to make you change your mind?" My eyes stayed on his. "Let them try." Something in my voice must have carried, because he finally pulled on the reins and swung his horse around. The 3 rode back the way they'd come, not in a hurry, but without looking back. When they were gone, I went inside. Mariah stood by the window, Lucy in her arms. "They're gone," I said. Her voice was quiet. "They'll be back." "Maybe," I said. "If they do, they'll find us ready." That afternoon, I rode into Calico Ridge. I found Sheriff Amos Dyer outside the jail, leaning against the hitch rail. He listened while I told him about the pikes. He shook his head. They've been trouble since before I wore this badge. I'll send word to the marshal, but you'd best keep your rifle close. I always do. Before heading home, I stopped at the general store for more ammunition and a sack of flour. By the time I rode into the yard, the sky was streaked with orange, and Mariah was at the porch, Lucy beside her. She took the sack from me, her fingers brushing mine. That night, after Lucy was asleep, we sat by the fire. Mariah's sewing lay in her lap, untouched. I don't want her growing up afraid, she said. She won't, I told her. Not while I have breath in me. She reached over and laid her hand on mine. We sat like that until the fire burned low. 2 days passed without sign of the pikes. The air stayed heavy clouds, gathering but never breaking. Then just after dawn on the 3rd day, I heard a single horse in the yard. I stepped out to see a rider. I didn't know a lanky man with a gray mustache and a weathered face. He tipped his hat. Name's Eli Harlan. Used to ride with the Pikes, not anymore. What brings you here? He looked toward the cabin. You've got something they want. Thought you should know they aim to come for it tonight. Why tell me? Because Loney was worse than the rest, and I've had my fill of their kind. Figured you'd rather be ready than buried. I gave a short nod. I appreciate the warning. Don't say where you got it. He turned his horse and rode out without another word. When I told Mariah, she didn't flinch. What do? We make sure they don't get past the yard. By nightfall, the rifle was loaded and set by the door. The lanterns were doused, the cabin quiet, except for the low crackle of the fire. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of hoofbeats on hard ground. I moved to the window. Shapes slid out of the dark, 3, maybe 4 riders coming in, slow, keeping to the shadows. I felt Mariah behind me, Lucy's small hand tucked in hers. They're here, I said. The riders slowed as they reached the edge of the yard. Moonlight caught the metal of their rifles. I eased the cabin door open and stepped onto the porch, the stock of my Winchester firm against my shoulder. Virgil Pike's voice carried low. We're here for the girl. Step aside and no one gets hurt. I took 1 step down into the dust. You're not taking her. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the cottonwoods. Then one of the men shifted in his saddle and the creak of leather broke the stillness. I leveled the rifle. Don't, I said. Behind me, I felt Mariah's presence at the doorway, Lucy safe in her arms. That steadied me. Virgil's eyes moved past me toward them, and his expression turned mean. You'll regret this, he muttered. The first shot split the night, but it wasn't mine. From the shadow of the barn, Eli Harlan stepped out, his revolver already smoking. One of the riders cried out, clutching his arm. Everything broke then, hooves churning gunfire cracking against the dark. I fired twice, the recoil sharp against my shoulder. When the dust settled, the Pikes were retreating, Virgil swaying in his saddle, his threat carried off by the wind. Eli lowered his gun. Figured you could use a hand, he said. I nodded once. You figured right. By the time Sheriff Dyer and 2 deputies arrived at dawn, the yard was quiet again. We told them what happened, and they rode out after the Pikes. I knew they wouldn't get far. That evening, the 3 of us sat on the porch. The air was cool, the horizon painted with the last gold of the day. Lucy leaned against Mariah, her eyes half closed. They won't be back, I said. Mariah's hand found mine. Then we can breathe again. I looked at them, this woman and child who'd come into my life by chance and stayed by choice. Blood didn't make a family out here. Loyalty did. Kindness did. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain. Somewhere out on the ridge, a coyote called. I felt the weight of the last few weeks lift, leaving something steady and sure in its place. Life on the frontier never promised safety, but it gave a man the chance to stand for what mattered. And sometimes, if he was lucky, it gave him someone worth standing for. If this story has settled with you, take a moment to think about the folks who've stood by you and the ones you've stood by in turn. Those ties are worth holding on to.